welcome to Judica County. My name's Josh Whitaker. I'm your host today. On our podcast today, we're going to focus on what a buyer needs to know in a residential real estate closing. So today we're going to be concerned with the buyer of a residence, a house, and what they're going to need to be concerned, what they can expect from the closing process, what they can expect from their closing attorney, and we're going to be talking about North Carolina. So if you're watching this and you're in another state or you're buying property in another state, we are just concerned with the closing process in the state of North Carolina for residential real estate. And so that's what we'll focus on today. We've got a panel put together of attorneys to kind of take you through some of the things that we think would be important to a buyer. Starting on the end, we have Mr. Damian McCullers.
Good morning.
He is an attorney with the law firm of McCullers, Whitaker, and Hamer, as is Miss Ashley Penner and Mr. Joe Hamer. Again, my name is Josh Whitaker. I am also an attorney with the law firm of McCullers, Whitaker, and Hamer. So I want to get started today. If you've gone under contract on a real property, on a residence, your first residence, your second home, your lake home, rental property, any kind of residential real estate, more than likely your real estate agent or someone you know is going to refer you to a closing attorney. And our law firm, the law firm of McCullers, Whitaker, and Hamer, we do a lot of residential closings. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to send you a little introductory letter here, and we'll have a link to this under the podcast so you can take a look at it. But it gives you a lot of information. It introduces us, and it introduces you to, again, the process. And we get a lot of questions from this letter. We find that buyers have a lot of preconceived ideas and notions of how a real estate transaction works. We have a lot of folks who move to North Carolina from other states, New York, California, where attorneys aren't as involved as they are in North Carolina. And so this will be a good method for us to answer a lot of the questions that we get from people who just aren't very familiar with the closing process. And so I wanted to start by actually talking about what a closing attorney does for you. And so in our scenario, you've gone under contract on a house, and your contract has been referred to us either by someone you trust or you found us on the internet or through a referral, and we're going to start working on your closing. And so I'm gonna hand it off to Joe. Joe's gonna tell us a little bit about what we do in that process.
So our office is basically, on a fundamental level, responsible for coordinating your closing, which involves many things. First and foremost, we're gonna perform a title examination on the property. We're gonna look at title. We're gonna make sure there's no kind of issues, no liens, no outstanding problems that you're gonna purchase this property and then they would then become your problems. We're going to make sure that the deed of conveyance, which gives you title to the property, is legally sufficient. Make sure that your loan closing documents are legally sufficient. We're going to coordinate with your lender, and we're going to send them all of the information that they need so that they can keep your loan in process, keep things moving, and get everything that they need to get done to get this to the closing table. We're going to coordinate with your realtor and get all the information we need from really all of the parties to make sure that we've got everything we need so we can have a smooth and efficient closing transaction. That's really the goal that we're shooting for above all else, is just to make it as easy, as painless as we can for everyone involved, and to also make sure that there are no kind of legal hiccups or problems that you're going to run into down the line.
I'm going to jump in there for just a minute because I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. There is definitely a big legal part of the closing process. We have to search title. We need to make sure your seller, we know how many mortgage liens they have, if they haven't paid their taxes, IRS liens, judgments, bankruptcies. There's a lot on the public record we search to make sure your seller is in a position to sell you the property and that we know about any defects so we can make you aware of them. But putting the legal part aside, there's also just a lot of coordination. We're the ones who are going to coordinate you, your agent, your sellers, their agent, the lender, surveyor. All these parties come together at the closing table. And in North Carolina, I think a typical turnaround for a transaction, we'll just say 30 days. It can be longer, it can be shorter, depending on, what kind of mortgage you're getting. Are you paying cash? But we've got a short time frame to do what we need to do and get everybody on the same page. And so I think the coordination aspect of it is something a lot of folks will overlook. But that's important.
So yeah, we do coordinate a lot of things, and then again, the big component, the big legal component, is the title search. And lenders are going to require you in North Carolina to come to an attorney for a closing because they want to make sure that they've got title insurance on the loan that they're giving you. So that title insurance is a big piece of what we do in procuring that title insurance policy. And Josh, you want to just talk a little about title insurance in general?
Sure. So title insurance, that's one of the biggest questions that we get from buyers. Do I need title insurance? Do I have to get title insurance? What is title insurance? And so a title insurer is an insurance policy just like your homeowner's insurance, just like your insurance on your car. It's insurance on the title. So we search the title and we're going to certify that after closing, once we've got all our money from from you and your seller and we've paid off all the liens, we're going to certify that you're going to have good, clear title to your new home. And title insurance steps in and insures that transaction for your mortgage lender and also for you. If you're getting a mortgage, your lender is going to require you to get title insurance. That's just something that you're going to have to pay for if you want them to lend you money. And again, that's one of the reasons we're involved, because as an attorney, we can certify to the title insurance company that everything looks good. It's good for you too. It has lender's coverage for your mortgage lender, but also has owner's coverage. And so if for some reason down the line, anything comes up with your title, a judgment doesn't get canceled, or anything at all happens, your title insurance company is there to protect you, defend you, and compensate you for any loss. So it's not something you will have to deal with very often, but it's handy to have, and it's something that you're going to have to get it. And even if you're paying cash, my firm strongly recommends that you always get title insurance.
And it's owner's title insurance is relatively inexpensive, and it's going to be there for as long as you own the property.
And I think another point that we should make is in North Carolina, your attorney does not make any money off a title insurance policy. So we strongly recommend you get title insurance. We make no money off of title insurance whatsoever. Rates
for title insurance are statutorily set. So they're going to be the same no matter who provides it. But again, that's correct. We send everything out to third-party title insurers, and they just strictly use the title search information we provide to them.
The second biggest question that we get is, do I need a survey? And so I'll go ahead and hand this over to Ashley, and we'll go and set the record straight on surveys as part of the transaction.
Surveys, not technically required unless your lender specifically wants one, and we don't usually see that take place, but certainly something advisable to have. Typically a survey will cost in the range of $400 or $500 roughly up front, and to know exactly what the boundary of your property is, because sometimes what looks like might be the boundary is not exactly it. Believe it or not, this is a great deal of importance to your neighbors, especially if you're going to be building a fence, for example, or if you're purchasing a property that already has a fence. If the folks built it and didn't have a survey performed and it's encroaching onto an adjoining property by either a few inches or a few feet, that can matter a great bit. And so for the expense up front can potentially save you, $4,000 or $5,000 down the road if you're having to tear down, replace, rebuild. For your lender, survey is important in showing whether or not you're in a flood zone. And so you're certainly going to want to know in advance whether or not you're in a flood zone. Your lender will require you typically to have flood insurance if that's the case. But survey, again, is something that for what expense it is up front, very little compared to what expense you can run into down the road if you don't have one but should have gotten one.
I'm going to add a few things, too, to what Ashley said. There's two. Like she said, a survey is not required. Now, we strongly recommend you get a survey. Surveys range, depending on the acreage, it's usually by the acre, and it usually varies widely from county to county where the property is located. But I think $350 to $500 is probably a pretty reasonable range for a survey of your average, 1 acre lot with a house. But we highly recommend you get surveys. If you do want a survey, you need to either order it on your own or let us know right away, because a surveyor, again, we're talking about usually about a 4-week time frame from when you go under contract to when you want to close and move in. A surveyor needs usually at least 2 weeks, assuming good weather. So the survey is not automatic if you decide you want one. I would also add, we usually require you to have a survey on new construction. I know a lot of builders will get you what we call an as-built survey.
A plot plan.
Yeah, but we want to make sure your house has been built according to setbacks on the right lot, and so new construction is a very important time to get a survey. And this podcast is focused on residential real estate, but I'll just say in commercial real estate, you're always getting a survey. Your lender's always going to want you to have an ALTA survey. It's a much bigger piece of the puzzle than it is residential. So there's just those two caveats on the survey.
Yeah, in addition to fences, which are very important for existing properties, there's the nightmare scenario with new construction, like you said, that your house isn't even built on your lot.
Right.
And it's happened to people.
It has.
So the survey, it's extremely important. And the earlier you can get it, the better it is for you.
So again, survey, very important, not to be overlooked. A lot of people today want to avoid any extra cost. It's already a very expensive event, probably the most expensive event of your life. And people want to cut costs, and that's understandable, but a survey, it's worth doing. More than likely, you're going to get a survey back and you're not going to have any issues, but any issues your survey would reveal would be major issues you would want to know about right away. And like Ashley said, not 10 years, 5 years down the road when your neighbor gets a survey and figures out the issue.
Or when you sell the property.
Or when you sell the property and your buyer gets a survey and figures it out. So what I want to talk about next is another question we get a lot. You're closing, you're going to have to bring some funds to closing. Down payment, cash to close, whatever people want to call it, you're going to have to get money to our law firm as settlement agent. And so I'm going to throw it down to Damien. Damien's going to talk to you about that.
So at your transaction, you're going to need to bring some money, and you'll be able to know kind of what that is ahead of time. Generally, you'll see that on your closing disclosure, and your agent will be able to let you know what that is. Once you know that number, you're going to want to get a certified check, cashier's check, whichever your bank will issue. Specifically for our firm, we request that if it's an amount over $2,000, that it be certified funds. I personally recommend that you just get certified funds regardless. I think it's just safer for everyone. You'll have a copy of the receipt. It kind of makes things easier as far as doing that. We also recommend anything over $2,000, it be wired. That's safer for us. But as it relates to the wire itself, there are a couple of things that you're going to want to do. You'll want to contact our firm. Our staff is great about getting out information to you. We do that very secure. We'll send you a portal to get our wiring instructions. It'll be secured again so that you can get that to us safely. There's been a just crazy amount of wire fraud that goes on. It seems like the better we get at protecting, the better the hackers get at trying to crack it. So it's just a constant battle. And we always want to make sure that the customers are protected and that we do it as safe as possible. And one of those ways is for you to get our wiring instructions. And one thing that you want to do, even once you get those via electronic mail, is to call us and just verify that those instructions are correct, that you have them correct, that the amount is correct.
Can't emphasize that enough. Call us and confirm whatever you have received, whether or not you're getting it from us. We typically don't send them to real estate agents anymore for them to disperse to the clients. We always want to send them directly, and we certainly want you to call us at our office to make sure what you have received is actually our wiring instructions and not someone else's somewhere.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. The wire fraud that Damien alluded to, that's a national problem that's taking place right now for settlement agents and closing attorneys. Is bad actors from overseas get into a hacked email account, whether it be a realtor or your Gmail account or your Hotmail account, and they figure out what's going on in real time, that you have a closing, that you're going to need to send some money somewhere. And so once they figure that out, they're going to create, they're either going to pretend to be someone that's already in the transaction, or they're going to spoof some email and try to insert themselves in the transaction as somebody who works for your lender, and they're going to try to give you phony wiring instructions. We've seen that happen, not a lot, but a lot more than we want to see. And so you getting your money to us is really one of the biggest concerns in the industry right now. It used to be you didn't even think about it twice. And then just in the past 5 years, that's a big concern. So you want to make sure if you need to get us money, we're going to require a wire if it's over $2,000. We do have some exceptions. So if you bank out of state and they need 3 days to send a wire and you didn't know how much you needed to bring, call us. We'll work with you on that. But you're going to want to have our wiring instructions that you got directly from us via a secure portal or secure email that you have then called us back to confirm over the telephone, because that's just the easiest way to combat this fraud, is just taking all the steps you can think of to make sure you've got good, solid information. So,
and I can't say enough, the staff is great about getting that information to you, and they're great about taking your phone calls and making sure that you have the correct information. It'll take a quick 5-minute phone call, and it'll save you a lot of headache in the back end.
I will too use this as an opportunity to tell you that you had mentioned figuring out what your final number is, what your cash to close number is. And because we're working on such a short time span, you may have an idea what that number is supposed to be. Your lender may have said, look, this is going to be about $15,000 or whatever it may be. but you may not get your final number until 2 or 3 days before closing because that number can change. We're getting invoices from people. You and your seller may agree to a credit and for some repairs that maybe didn't get done the right way. That final number is always going to be changing a little bit until right before closing. And so that final number usually is going to come from your lender. Once they feel good about all the information they have, your lender will communicate with you your final number. So that's a question we get a lot too.
Yeah, and like you said, you say 2 to 3 days before closing it can change. It can change potentially hours before closing, and that's just the nature of.
There are certain things that can't. So you'll get a disclosure at least 3 days prior to your closing that is going to be probably labeled final disclosure, but then that can still change. Certain things can't change. Your terms can't change. Your interest rate can't change. Your some of your lender fees can't change. But if we just found out you got a termite inspection and it needs to be paid at closing, we can add that. There's certain things like that. So it's going to be a moving target. And I think that makes a lot of people nervous. And as well it should, but it's just unfortunately just the way it goes.
And at the end of the day, if you've wired in, more funds than what you ultimately need, of course, we issue you a check right away with the difference, and vice versa. If you've wired in a little bit less, depending on the amount we're talking about, a personal check at the table is fine to make up the difference. Yeah,
our letter comes across our introductory engagement letter comes across a little stern, but we understand things happen, and there are ways to work around certain issues. Now, a couple other hot button issues or just questions that we get a lot as you're going through this is if you are married. So if you're buying a house, if you are married, your lender will more than likely require your spouse to sign some documents, even if your spouse isn't going to be on title, even if your spouse is not a borrower. Some lenders are changing and being more flexible with that, but I think the overarching principle in North Carolina, you're either married or you're not. Separated is not a status in North Carolina. You're either married or you're not married, and there is no in between.
And I think there's a good time to jump in there just for even some comedic relief. Your long-term girlfriend is not necessarily in North Carolina your wife.
No common law marriage.
There is no common law marriage, and some people believe that. So when we ask the question, "Are you married?" If you're filling out documents for your closing, we literally mean, did you get married and do you have a marriage license?
And we've had closings where someone, they told their lender, and for some reason the information didn't get to us, and so it comes up a couple of days before closing that you're married, but you've been estranged for 18 years and you don't really even know where your other spouse is, and that kind of stuff is problematic. So you'll want to have that sorted out and have a frank discussion with your lender. Again, there are things that we can do to help you, but we've got to know what we're dealing with.
And I think it's just as important on the flip side too as well. So make sure that your interpretation of divorce really means divorced as it relates to North Carolina, not that you've been separated for 25 years and you guys just don't speak. Like, you literally need to have a divorce decree in order to say that you're divorced and that, your spouse is no longer a part of the equation for your closing. And
in a perfect world, your lender, when you've applied for a mortgage, if you're paying cash, there's other things that we can do to help you. But if your lender should have ferreted all this out by now, and this should be something that is actively being dealt with. But so marital status and presence of spouse, transfer of keys. So in North Carolina, that's a big question that we get a lot. You will meet us. Let's say we're scheduled to close on the 28th of the month or the last Friday of the month. You're going to come meet with us to sign your documents. That's going to be your closing. So one of us will be sitting down with you and taking you through some of your note and your deed of trust and some other documents that your lender is going to require you to sign. Once we get done signing those documents, we're not done. You're done. You've signed everything that you need to sign, but we've still got some things to do. We need to make sure your seller signs some documents. We need to make sure we've received your money that may have been wired to us. Your lender's going to be wiring us money. Your lender has to review what we've signed and give us authority to record and disperse. So after you leave the closing table, we still have a couple of hours of work to do before we can go downtown. Well, we do it electronically. It sounds better if you say go downtown. We go to the courthouse and record your deed. Until we do that, then your seller does not have to give you keys to the property. Your seller does not have to let you in the house. So if you're coming to closing in a moving truck thinking you're going to walk away with keys and you haven't discussed it with your seller already, you may have some unpleasant conversations coming up.
Yeah, I would think as a default rule, just assume that you're not getting keys at closing. Of course, sellers, you see some sellers and listing agents that will work with you and that are going to be a little more lenient, but black letter law, you're not going to own that property until we fund it, until we've recorded. And we're going to do that as quickly as humanly possible. But you got to think every lender's package varies and every lender's requirements vary. And a lot of these lenders want to see literally everything that you signed. And there's different turnaround times for that. So even though we will work as fast and as diligently as we can, a lot of times our hands are going to be tied, and all we can do is coordinate with your lender to get this process done as quickly as possible.
It's important. Guys, I'm trying to think if there's any other questions that we hear a lot of from buyers, and I think those are the biggest things that we hear. We're going to send you an engagement letter, and we'll have a copy of it for you underneath this podcast so you can click on it. But we're also going to ask you to give us some basic information: your name, spouse's name. Do you want us to order a survey? Who's doing your homeowner's insurance? It'll give you some things to think about. And then we're always here for you. If you go through this and your questions aren't answered here, just give us a call, shoot us an email. But that's a good, quick run through of some of the major issues or major questions that we get from buyers in a real estate closing transaction. Anything else, guys?
Nope.
All right. We'll see you soon.
So long.